All right. So in our first part, we talked about a simple bonding curve, and we saw how the price of token varies with the increasing supply and with the network effect and how the ecosystem grows. And we are going to talk a bit more on now going from a simple bonding curve or going from a simple function to a bit more, I would say, complex. Well, it's not complex, but to a bit more detailed bonding curve and kind of try to get more into how the real environment operates. Because if you look at the original bonding curve, which is our first diagram, you would basically notice that it's a straight line. So, looking at it from a token economics perspective, if you come in late, if you buy a token late, you get a higher price. If you buy in early, you get a lower price. The same is also true for selling it. So if you sell it, let's say you've bought a token early and now you sell it late, and then that kind of gives you the higher price, so you make a profit on your token sales. If there are a lot of sales and you've bought the token late and the price is continuously dropping, people are using those pumping and dumping schemes. We'll talk about that later as well. But in very simple mathematics, if you've bought a token late at a higher price and a lot of people start dumping their tokens, and then you also dump it when the price has gone pretty much down into the same graph, you end to lose money, or you tend to lose the price of your token. And this is where the bonding curve kind of matures a bit. And we now have two bonding functions or two bonding curve functions. One is the buy function, and the other is basically the sell function. So the buy function is growing at a different pace, and the sell function is growing at a different pace. So when you're buying so when you're buying tokens, you basically buy it according to how this function dictates the price of the token. And on your y-axis, you still have the price of the token, and on your x-axis, you still have the supply. And this is the curve. This is the function that dictates how the buy price will variate. Whereas now, when you want to sell your token, you see that the sell function is a little lower than the buy function. So you sell at a lower price, but you still gain. You still have the incentive, you still have the market incentive to hold the token, because if you hold it for some time, you actually sell it at a higher price than what you bought it for. So you see that there's a separate function for buying, and then there's a separate bonding curve function for selling. So these are essentially two bonding curves, one for buying and one for selling. Now, what happens to this difference? So there is the gap in between the buy and the sell function. Now, this is the money that gets accumulated within the economics of the whole ecosystem, and this money can essentially be used to fund a DAO, or this money can essentially be used to fund a foundation, or this money can be essentially used to run the ecosystem. This is basically the difference that you have between the buy and the sell bonding curve. The difference, that amount can be utilized for these activities, whereas you still continue to maintain and provide liquidity to your token holders. So, talking about a bonding curve, one of the strongest feature of a bonding curve is that it provides automated market maker. It creates that AMM effect. It's an automated market making utility tool, which is what basically our exchanges provide us. So, and who governs these bonding curves? It's basically your smart contract. So these bonding curves are actually coded and programmed in your Ethereum or Solidity smart contract, which basically dictate how the sell and how the price of this function is going to work. And that kind of takes me to my next slide over here. So what you see over here is basically bonding curves explained as automated market makers. And what we just talked about is that they obviously provide us that automated liquidity without the need for an exchange. Bonding curves are essentially hard coded inside your smart contract, and that's how they provide liquidity. Um, Who governs these bonding curve functions? It's obviously the program code that's written in your smart contract. So this is how it works basically inside the bonding curve. And you can simply visualize it from how token economics in a blockchain ecosystem works, or in a blockchain based economy, or an economy that's designed around tokens. That when you want to buy tokens, you essentially go to the smart contract, your automated market maker, and you say, I want to mint tokens. So you essentially mint tokens. The smart contract mints the tokens for you. So you give something as a collateral, and you take or fiat as a collateral, and you take tokens from the smart contract, thus increasing the supply of the tokens inside the ecosystem. And when you essentially want to give the tokens back to the smart contract, that, hey, give me my collateral back, and here are the tokens, you essentially go back to the smart contract, you use your sell function, and that's essentially where you give the tokens to the smart contract, and it returns you back your collateral or fiat. So this is how an economy essentially works inside a blockchain ecosystem. And talking about token economics and tokenomics, um, which are essentially two different words but used mostly interchangeably. But when we say token economics, we are basically talking about the whole economy of the ecosystem. It's a marketplace. It's a place where buyers and sellers and stakeholders and all the actors come about and meet. And when you're designing a token economics system, you're essentially just not looking at the roles, or you're essentially just not looking at what role wants what information from that system. You're essentially looking at the whole incentive structure. You're looking at the market design. You're looking at the mechanism design. Those are things that we're going to cover later. But you're essentially looking at, before even you go to token design, you're essentially looking at the market and the mechanism design, the rules of the game, how the economy is going to work, how the trade is going to happen, how there are going to be incentives inside the system, how people are going to interact with each other. These are essentially the rules of the economy. So you're essentially creating like a country where people come and interact with each other, and they buy, they sell, they trade, they've got incentives, they've got rules, and they have to follow certain rules. So, which is where then the governance aspect of token economics comes in. So, this is holistically what token economics is all about. And when you're talking about tokenomics, which is where we visualize just a pie chart and then some token distribution and then some initial allocation of tokens. So tokenomics basically ends there. But when we are talking about token economics, we are talking about the whole ecosystem and how the token circulates within the ecosystem, even beyond the ecosystem, even outside your country, even outside your economy. When I say country, I'm talking about the blockchain based ecosystem. So, how that token then goes out of the ecosystem and how that interacts with other parties outside the ecosystem and brings value to both the ecosystems. So, this is where the whole token economics aspect comes into the play. So with that, I will go back into my bonding curves, and hopefully you have a good idea of bonding curves until we meet in the next lesson.